I couldn't think, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't move much.
All those things can, and clearly in your case, were being caused by learned neural circuits in your brain.
And stresses like that is really hard, and you don't deserve it. No one deserves it. And really being able to come into yourself and identify with that self-love and feel your emotions, your normal emotions, and process that. Hi, I'm Dr. Becca Kennedy.
And I'm Dr. Howard Schubiner.
And this is The Science Behind the Symptoms, where we explore the new science of neuroplasticity through a lens of curiosity.
And we are a podcast of the Association for the Treatment of Neuroplastic Symptoms.
And welcome to this episode. We're very excited. The last several episodes, we laid the groundwork and really talked about the overview of what this neuroplasticity approach is. Right. And now what we're going to do is
It was just me and you.
Oh, yeah, it was just
the two of us, so it was kind of boring, so we needed to liven it up a little.
Exactly, right. We brought in a guest.
Yeah.
Spice things up. Exactly. Yeah. And so our guest today is Rebecca Tolin. And what we're going to do is talk about her story of what she went through and this approach. And then Howard and I are going to dive into the science about what she was told. So today we're going to talk about EBV. So with that, we're going to start with Rebecca's story. And welcome, Rebecca.
Oh,
and
so
EBV
great.
is, of course, Epstein-Barr virus, one of the herpes viruses that we're going to be talking about.
Thank you. Yep. Yeah. I appreciate that. We talk in acronyms. I forget.
We do. We're both doctors.
All right. Take it away, Rebecca.
So, yeah, I don't know if I'll be able to liven things up with this story because it was such a difficult chapter of my life. I went through a really traumatic event and got these 3 viruses, and my system just crashed. I went from being a really busy, active person in my early 30s to hardly being able to walk around my house. I had
Rebecca, I'm going to stop for a sec. The 3 viruses, were they just sort of normal viruses, like cold viruses or kind of flu viruses?
Yeah, I think so. I got them coming back from China, actually, and it seemed like just 3 really bad viruses in a row, like the cold or the flu.
Okay. Now, it sounded like you got 3 at the same time, and it was confusing. How would you know you had 3 viruses at one time,
Yeah, it's like the virus kept coming back, so it would come back again, it would subside, and it would come back a 3rd time. But then my system just completely went haywire, and I felt like I had the flu 24/7. I couldn't sleep. Everything ached. I couldn't even remember the name of close friends or colleagues. I hardly had the energy to walk around the house or outside. There was just so many symptoms. It was really terrifying.
And that hit you in a course of like a few weeks or a few months or what?
Overnight, I would say when this 3rd virus came, or it may have been the 3rd round of the same virus, it hit me overnight. And just everything hurt, everything burned. I couldn't think, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't move much. It was a pretty sudden onset, and it was really that quintessential crash.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you felt like you've been hit by a truck or something. I mean, some equivalent of some massive single moment that took you out. It's horrible.
Actually, that's a good description. It felt like a dump truck had ran me over. And I had no reference for this because I had felt pretty good in my body. I was really active. I slept really well prior to that, but everything just hurt. Yeah, so then I, of course, went to doctors, and my mom had to drive me around because I couldn't drive. And doctor after doctor would diagnose me with chronic fatigue syndrome, or ME/CFS.
And how long did it take? How long did you have the symptoms before you got that diagnosis of ME/CFS, would you say?
I would say within a few months, they diagnosed me with that. Yeah, because I started going to doctors right away. First, just primary care, then endocrinologists, rheumatologists, different types of specialists. And particularly a rheumatologist, really honed in on viruses. And he said Epstein-Barr virus was likely causing all these symptoms, even though it was MECS.
These are tests and seeing all these doctors getting tests and
Yeah,
everything.
it wasn't your heart, it wasn't your liver, it wasn't your kidneys. They really didn't find an underlying disease. You weren't anemic, right? It was
None of
just
those things, and I did
just
tons of tests.
yeah.
I mean, I still have some of them here.
Oh my
Oh my
god.
gosh.
But yeah, they didn't find any disease process, no autoimmune disease, although I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism at one point, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, but that seemed to resolve and the treatment didn't work. Sjogren's syndrome, chronic Lyme disease, mold exposure, leaky gut, candida overgrowth. These were all other diagnoses that came over the years because this dragged on 13 years.
And so at the beginning, just so people know, the ME is myalgic encephalomyelitis and CFS is chronic fatigue syndrome. And those are, diagnoses that are kind of like, we don't know. We know the symptoms are all the horrible symptoms you had. So we're going to call it that, even though we don't know what exactly is causing it. But those words imply that there's something wrong with your energy system, basically, that you're just so tired and weak and can't think straight and all those things. You probably had other things like headaches and GI stuff. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, terrible headaches, bloating. I was constipated all the time, insomnia. I was also diagnosed with interstitial cystitis, which is just another condition, but lots of bladder pain, headaches. Yeah, it felt like everything was not working right.
It's like nothing didn't hurt. Nothing.
Nothing didn't hurt.
My God.
And there was intense burning. There was just burning all through my arms, my legs, my brain felt like it was burning. Yeah, it was a really scary situation.
Horrible. And after the medical doctors couldn't really figure it out and say, well, they call it MECFS, but that doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't, because there's no effective treatment for that. You probably started going to alternative doctors, I'm guessing, because you had all these other diagnoses that came up. Is that what happened?
Oh, yeah. I went to travel to see 2 CFS specialists, and they honed in a lot on the adrenal exhaustion and using different glandulars to try to correct that. But I also saw integrative medicine doctors and functional medicine doctors and naturopathic doctors, and that's where I got the candida overgrowth diagnosis and leaky gut, and they put me on really strict diets. For 3 years, I literally only ate green vegetables and either chicken or fish, and I was so
Wow.
bloated. I felt terrible on that diet. I think I got worse because I just felt really scared I was gonna eat the wrong thing.
And you were so scared that you had to do everything, right?
Oh,
You
yeah.
had to do so many things. And if you strayed, if you ate the wrong thing, if you missed your supplement, you were probably spending, I don't know how much money out of pocket.
All out of pocket, just I figured in this 13 years, it was several $100,000, and of course, my parents had to support me, and I had all the little pill baggies and boxes, and my whole life just revolved around taking these different herbs and supplements and eating the diets, and I really didn't have much energy, so I eventually had to leave my career and go on disability. And it was just really a pretty miserable existence.
That is terrible. How many how many clinicians and doctors would you say that you saw over all those years?
I have counted them. There was almost 50 different clinicians and doctors.
Um,
Wow.
After the doctors weren't helping me, I did move on to different healers, energy healers, and Chinese medicine practitioners, but they were all just treating me like there was something wrong with my body and giving me either medication, supplements, diets, or therapies to correct it, and it never helped.
And there was something wrong with your body, right? Your body was feeling terrible and feeling broken and overwhelmed and debilitated.
Oh,
Right.
yeah. I mean, I thought there had to be something so wounded and broken in me. Like, to feel this bad, I just had to really have a horribly irreversible condition. And they would also say things like your mitochondria are damaged. And so I didn't know how to fix that other than to
Yes.
rest. I was told to rest and to pace.
Right.
So my world just became smaller and smaller. Even socializing with loved ones would cause a big flare up for me.
I'm hoping this story has a happy ending, Rebecca, because you're really bringing you're really bringing me down here.
I'm nothing's up here. It really is, and thankfully it does.
Stay tuned.
It's not funny. I mean, it's mind-boggling how bad somebody could feel on one day after being fine, and then it persisted for how many years was it?
For 13 years. And I should say with the Epstein-Barr virus that I did treat that with antiviral IVs, and a doctor, the rheumatologist gave me that, and that was so hard on my system, and I don't know if it was the medication itself or it was the nocebo, but I really crashed after that. Like, I just couldn't get out of bed, and still, apparently the antibodies went down or the labs went down, but I didn't feel any better.
So how were you diagnosed? So Epstein-Barr virus, or EBV, was one of the things that was attributed to causing your symptoms. Is that right?
Yeah.
And how was that diagnosed? How did that come about?
Well, all these many labs that were taken, and I even saved this one, that shows the Epstein-Barr IgG that was just really high, and it showed these astronomically high levels, and it's scary when you get these labs that say high, and then the doctor said, "This is really a problem." We see this often with people that have chronic fatigue syndrome, and we don't really have a cure, but we can try different things and
So
see it.
you had this test result in black and white that you were looking at that said it was abnormal, said that it was high, and then your doctor said that that high level of the Epstein-Barr was the reason for your symptoms. And how did he describe that to you?
Yeah. So he described that the high Epstein-Barr could be causing this ongoing viral reaction in the body. And so that's why I felt like I continued to have the flu because my body was constantly fighting the Epstein-Barr. And then one doctor told me that the Epstein-Barr virus had seeped into my brain through the blood-brain barrier and
My God.
really scared me. After that, I thought I could feel the virus swimming around, and I already had a really burning sensation in my brain and the swelling sensation. So that was not helpful, and now looking back, I would get worse after receiving some of this scary news.
And they said, okay, well, great. This is Epstein-Barr virus. We have antiviral medication. We'll treat you with it. And they did. And it didn't work. You didn't get better. And in fact, you even apparently felt worse sometimes after your infusions, right? Is that right?
I did. I felt worse, went back into being bedbound for a number of weeks after that, after getting the infusions, and then we just stopped that because my system couldn't tolerate it, but there was still this sense that if only I could get all the treatment, I would get better, but I couldn't tolerate it.
Understandable, because that's the normal way that it works in medicine and health. You have a test, there's a treatment for the test, and you should get better.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about the science behind EBV infections. And Beck and I will kind of discuss that, some of the research that's been done. And I think you'll be very interested in it.
Very much.
And then we're going to come back to your story for hopefully a little more uplifting news because I see you smiling. So
There's good
it's got
news
to
on
have a better ending than that because that was just devastating.
Yeah.
We're so
And
sorry that you
there's a
had to
lot
go
there's
through
a
that.
there's a lot of patients that have been told that the reason for their symptoms is because of an infection or a reactivation of the Epstein-Barr virus. So yeah, Howard and I are going to go through the science of what do we know about the science about Epstein-Barr, and how does it make sense that that may or may not be the reason for symptoms?
Yeah. Okay, Becca, you start. How many people get Epstein-Barr virus infections in the world, and what age do they get them?
Yeah, so let's even look back at what Epstein-Barr virus causes. And what it causes is mononucleosis, and a viral infection that the acute infection mainly happens in kids or young adults, kind of teenagers to young 20s is the main um, age frame that people have an acute infection, and it causes fever and sore throat, swollen glands, cough, kind of a viral infection, and a lot of fatigue. And it actually can also sometimes lead to swelling of the spleen, more rare than liver, but, an overall viral infection.
And that is generally often the rule in the U.S., but around the world, in the third world and most of the world, most children will get EBV as an infection when they're 3 or 5 or 7 or 9 and have a cold or a cough, not even the mono syndrome. And so they're exposed to it. And what happens after you're exposed to that virus, it gets better. And whether you have it as your kid with a cold-like thing or bronchitis-like syndrome, or you get the mono syndrome, which occurs, as Becca said, later in teenage years or young adults, what happens after that? For the 99.9% of people, they get better, right? They recover because our body responds to the virus by creating antibodies to fight the virus. And what happens to those antibodies after the virus is gone out of your system?
Those antibodies stick around because
Exactly.
that is what our immune system does. The antibodies are our own body's cells. They're the cells that fight infection. And when we're exposed to some infections, we create these antibodies that then stick around for the rest of our life in order to protect us. So people don't get that same infection over and over because we have these antibodies that fight it. Although with this particular virus, it's a little bit more unusual than some viruses. Like most cold viruses, we get the virus, we get the infection, our immune system fights it off, and then we don't have the virus anymore. But Howard, what's peculiar about the Epstein-Barr?
Well, first of all, the antibodies. So the acute antibodies often are the IgM antibodies for an acute infection. IgG antibodies also will occur a little bit later, but the IgG antibodies are typically the ones that can last a long time. And those are the ones that you had, Rebecca, the IgG antibodies.
Mhm.
So those are the ones that Becca has, that I have, that we all have.
But Howard, how many people around the world have IgG antibodies?
Everyone, virtually everyone.
Like
the world.
95% of the
Yeah.
world's population
Yes.
has IgG antibodies because it's a very common virus that we all get exposed to at some point in our life.
Exactly. So the idea that these IgG antibodies that they measured were the actual cause of your disease doesn't make sense. There's 3 studies that I want to tell folks about. In 2022, O'Neill and some other people did a study where they evaluated 59 people with chronic fatigue syndrome and 44 healthy people, tested for over 122 different viruses, including EBV, including Lyme disease bacteria and all sorts of bacteria and viruses. They found no correlation between any of these bacteria or viruses and the chronic fatigue syndrome compared to the healthy people. Another study from 2023 came out, and they did EBV antibody levels, and they found no association between those and chronic fatigue syndrome. And then another study reviewed all the evidence for chronic fatigue and EBV, again, finding no evidence for this connection. So researchers have looked at this pretty intensely because of these claims that EBV is the culprit for these ME and chronic fatigue syndrome folks, and we haven't found it. That's not the case.
Boy, do I wish I had found you 2 earlier. And it just makes me wonder why doctors point to these IgG antibodies as the cause, because it really scared me more.
I don't.
Absolutely. I think it's also important to understand. So, what you had checked were the IgG antibodies, which are the ones that are made when we have the infection, but then they stick around for most of or all of our life. And then, as Howard mentioned, the IgM antibodies are the antibodies that are made faster and then they generally go away. And so it's thought that the IgM antibodies, if those are tested for, are indicative for an acute infection. So some patients have had that checked, and then their clinician tells them that that's what's going on is a reactivation because the IgM antibodies, because of the acute ones. However, it is not so black and white. And there were studies that showed 10%, sometimes 20% of completely asymptomatic people also have positive IgM antibodies. And in my decades of work in primary care, we get these antibody tests for EBV, and there's all these different ones, and there's supposed to be a pattern to show if this one is high and that one's low, it means acute or chronic or oh my gosh, it never followed the pattern that it was supposed to follow.
Wait
I
a
was like,
second.
well, this one's high and that one's a little bit high and that one's middling. And I mean, it was never clear.
The herpes viruses, EBV is one of the herpes viruses, like herpes simplex, herpes zoster virus, and other ones. And these chickenpox, exactly. And these viruses can remain dormant in the body. And people can actually shed these viruses sometimes. So you can actually find some people can actually have cultures where they can see, oh, there's a little bit of virus coming out. And this is normal in normal, healthy people. And the other thing is that because of that, the antibody levels often vary quite a bit over time. So the antibody levels might be higher, and then a few months later, they might be lower. And that's why doctors who are tuned into this and think it's the problem, they see these changes in the antibodies going up and down, which are normal variants that happen in everybody, but they're interpreting those changes as being, oh, it's better, oh, it's worse. And then they're treating with, antivirals. And so the whole thing, I don't know how to say it nicely, Becca. It just seems misguided. To be kind, it just seems misguided.
I mean, it just doesn't make sense from the science. Clinicians care about patients, they want to help them. And when we don't understand what's causing these overwhelming, debilitating symptoms, we're going to look for something. I mean, that's what I did as a primary care doctor. Everybody comes back to me when they've tried to meet those other 50 doctors. They just keep coming back to their primary care doctor. And before I knew about this approach, I tried everything I possibly could.
Sure, thing because people are suffering so much, and their symptoms are real. They're not imaginary. They're not all in their head. They're
Right.
real, and
Yeah.
they're devastating. And the 13 years that you suffered is more than I can't even imagine.
I know.
Can't even imagine going through that.
I know.
Yeah.
So what happened then? What?
Wait, I want to say one more point
okay.
about
Please.
the virus. I think is important also. Like Howard was saying, many times the virus does live dormant in our body, and then our immune system keeps it at bay. If our immune system is depressed for whatever reason, like if our immune system is not functioning as robustly as it could, then these dormant viruses could come out and have an acute response. So there's also some thoughts that maybe autoimmune conditions are caused by EBV, but an autoimmune condition or other conditions, what's going on in someone's body is maybe their immune system is not as strong. And so maybe you can find, like Howard was saying, maybe the virus is coming out. It's not the EBV coming out is not the cause of the autoimmune condition. I mean, it's more kind of secondarily happening. And there was a study that looked at people with very severe AIDS whose immune system is really, really, really low. And even in that really extreme circumstance, some people got the reactivation of EBV, but not all of them. And that's even in the situation of a very, very extreme immunosuppressed state.
And
I
most
did
people,
get a lot of viruses in that time. I got lots of viruses, and I don't know if they were new ones or the EBV coming up, but you're saying that it would just be my brain wasn't functioning as well, and therefore the immune system's not functioning as well.
well, it's important to know, you know, first of all, anybody can catch viruses, they're around a lot. People get a whole variety of GI viruses, nasal viruses, etc. And the other thing is you could have gotten other neuroplastic symptoms that seemed like viruses also. So it's a little bit hard to know unless you're actually testing for those viruses because you were so sick. But the thing is that the level of your immune system function was normal. It wasn't like in this AIDS category, that Becca's talking about, where severe
Yeah.
immune dysfunction. And the immune dysfunction that occurs in people with chronic fatigue syndrome is very mild. And it's not enough to be causing these, major reactivations.
Yeah, and it might be lowered some, if we're in the chronic stress state, chronically, our body doesn't necessarily put all of its energy resources to a robust immune function. So you can get, be more prone to getting viral infections for sure, but not, something to the level of like someone who has AIDS or something like that.
Yeah,
And I
it's
see,
not enough to get the virus in your brain. Let's put it that way.
yes, right. Yeah.
And be unable.
Howard said, I see people who have neuroplastic symptoms that are just like a virus, just like a cold. Like they get congestion and cough and, all of that. And the reason I know is because they get it once a month or once every 6 weeks, just like clockwork. That regularity wouldn't happen with just, the randomness of getting a cold.
The shocking thing is that the brain creates what we experience. Predictive processing. The brain creates what we see, what we hear, and what we feel. And the brain can create cough. The brain can create nose running. The brain can create all the symptoms you had: constipation, the burning, the bladder issues, headache, the can't think straight, fatigue. All those things can, and clearly in your case, were being caused by learned neural circuits in your brain.
Mhm.
And that was the happy pivot,
Yeah.
which is finally coming. I promise there is one.
Waiting with bated breath.
Yes. So really, I had never met anyone who recovered from chronic fatigue syndrome until I took this online poetry class, and this woman recovered from CFS. And she said, oh, it was through this work of John Sarno and Howard Schubiner. And she explained all the science and that she had the same symptoms as I had, and she recovered. And honestly, it was the only thing that made sense because I had been just like a dog chasing my tail for 13 years. And also, she asked me something none of the doctors ever asked was, did you go through anything stressful prior to the onset of symptoms? And I went through an extremely stressful and traumatic event, and then a lot of stressors after that. And I got it. So she told me, you are not sick, after she explained the science. And I literally said, I'm not sick. I get what's happening. It's a state in my brain and nervous system. I had this immediate response. I jumped up, I ran around the block, and I felt like I had gotten out of prison. I was so joyous. I could run. I hadn't ran in 13 plus years.
Wow.
I literally filled with energy because I got it. I believed it. I felt really safe. I felt free, actually. But that was not the end of my story.
What made you believe her? What do you think it was that touched you or really made sense to you? Because that's remarkable. Because many people might say, yeah, right, it might work for you, but not for me.
And I probably would have said that and even hit her years prior, but after banging my head against the wall and doing all the things doctors said, I just realized it was futile. At that point, I think it touched me that she really listened to me and she asked about stress and trauma, and that helped. And she did explain some of the science pretty well. And that resonated with me because I had been a science reporter. And I don't know, she explained it wasn't a disease. It was shifting the state of my brain and nervous system because of all this emotional stress. And it just somehow clicked.
So what happened after you ran around the block?
I wish I just kept running and that was the end. But no, there was a lot of work because all those learned neural pathways. So symptoms started coming back, but I knew I was on the right path. And so I got Unlearn Your Pain. And I really do say that's the best $25 I ever spent. I worked through that book. It was so helpful to me. I still had it in my mind that the Epstein-Barr virus, as well as some of the other things like the chronic Lyme, were causing the symptoms. And so I emailed you, Dr. Schubiner, and you helped explain that these were harmless antibodies or bacteria and they weren't causing the symptoms. And getting that validation made a huge difference because I was still hanging on to that. I was kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And so then I just really dove into this whole neuroplastic recovery approach. And it took some months, but I slowly regained my capacity. And I think the things that were really helpful for me was first just the knowledge. That was a complete game changer. I really had to understand all these labs, all these results were not causing the symptoms. And then reconnect with my body. So somatic tracking was really helpful. Just all of pain reprocessing therapy, somatic tracking. And when I would track the sensations like the burning in the brain that the doctor said was Epstein-Barr, sometimes it would turn into anger. Like these emotions started to emerge and they would rise up and sometimes a memory would come and sometimes it wouldn't. And it felt really deeply cathartic. I worked with a mind-body coach in this field, which was really helpful. I did expressive writing. And I think just the exposure therapy was really important because my brain and body reacted to everything. Talking, eating, walking, light, sound. So I just had to start exposing myself to these things and endure the symptoms through this new lens that I'm retraining my brain.
And where did you find the courage to do that?
Oh, thanks for asking that. Oh, at this point, I had felt so dejected for so long that I actually finally felt hope. And I knew this was the way through. And I guess that's how I found the courage to look at the hurts. To be honest, it was a relief. It was a relief that finally we were talking about the big pink elephant in the room, which was all the major psychological stress I went under before the symptoms and then during. It was actually really meaningful and cathartic instead of the process just being devoid of meaning and me being this collection of lab work. It was like I finally rediscovered my heart and my purpose in my own healing.
Amazing.
And did you get a sense for what were the kinds of things that started it in the first place? And what is there things that you needed to change?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought that up because I definitely have the quintessential TMS personality traits. And I do believe for me, trauma was really what started it because I experienced a sexual assault and that's where just everything crashed overnight. So I think that was the trigger, but certainly I had a lifetime of being really hard on myself. Just driving myself into perfectionism, into exhaustion in many ways in my career, not taking time for play or pleasure or balance. So I've spent a lot of time, and I still work with that recovering perfectionist that just wants to do so good and do everything perfectly. But linking early emotional experiences with the development of those personality traits has been really helpful. And I would also say like self-compassion helped me both have the courage and the tenderness to start being with myself in a kind way and not blaming myself for everything that had happened, but really giving myself love for everything that had happened.
How were you able to address the sexual assault?
Some trauma therapy has been helpful with that. I didn't ever notice that the trauma therapy shifted the symptoms, interestingly,
Mm.
but different types of somatic therapy, and I did a little bit of EMDR, has just been helpful in understanding it and feeling safer in my body and safer in the world. I don't know that I have resolved that completely, but I was able to resolve the chronic symptoms even with that being part of my past.
And you have a different relationship with yourself, would you say?
Absolutely. Completely different relationship with myself. Because also, I think, and this is not to blame myself at all, but I was in certain environments that left me more vulnerable to what happened, and it was not my fault. But I really wasn't in touch with my body, and therefore I wasn't in touch with my intuition. And so now, through the somatic tracking, through expressive writing, and just other emotional work, I'm much more in touch with how I'm feeling inside emotionally and honoring that and really acting from what's in my best interest rather than just what I think is other people are going to like or how I'm going to fit in. And also the self-compassion. I mean, there's just a lot of kindness and softness I have for myself for what I've been through, how it shaped me as a person in so many ways for the better. I mean, I wouldn't wish this on anyone, but I wouldn't wanna go back to being who I was before all this happened. I'm so grateful for who I've become through this process. Yeah.
Really amazing, Rebecca. Awesome to see. And thank you so much for sharing that really heartfelt story and going through traumas and stresses like that is really hard and you don't deserve it. No one deserves it. And really being able to come into yourself and identify with that self-love and feel your emotions, your normal emotions, and process that. And really be able to get through, I think, what Howard has called before the post-traumatic growth of the hardships that people go through in life.
I just appreciate you both so much because I feel like for so many years, going to doctors was just a source of feeling misunderstood, and I know they meant well, but I felt really misunderstood and not heard, and so it really means a lot to me. Both of your work has impacted me deeply, and just that you would take the time to really listen to my story means a lot.
I mean, we're just seeing you and hearing you now is so moving and so beautiful for what you've been able to do. And it's inspiring to us. And we do this every day. But nevertheless, it's inspiring to us in terms of your courage, your strength, your intuition, your knowledge, and your actions you've taken to take care of yourself and to make changes in your life. I mean, that's incredible. Becca, you probably see this kind of thing a lot.
I do, yes.
Yeah.
And it's the beauty of life is, again, there's this trauma and this hardship, but to see someone like you, Rebecca, that, I mean, you did this. You're the one that got yourself better. It's just so amazing. I mean, there's the guidance and learning the tools, being taught the tools, learning them from Howard, all these things. But ultimately, to see someone go through this process themselves and the amount of strength and courage it takes and where they get to is just really incredible. And it's really a gift to be able to experience that.
I know. And all you needed to start was a little bit of science.
Right.
Just a little bit of science could go a long way.
It can. It just was so helpful to hear that it was not Epstein-Barr virus.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. And there are some important missing pieces for sure that just bring it all together.
But then doing this work, it's just like this sense of empowerment is another thing that I really got out of this whole experience. Because instead of just continually going to someone else to cure me, I realized that the remedies inside of myself and working with your emotions and standing up to fear and re-engaging with life gives you this courage, right? And this bravery that you really can't get any other way but by doing it.
Hmm. Yeah, right. Little by little.
And how have you used this to springboard into, because you had to rebuild your whole life and your career was totally on hold or lost or whatever. How have you used this to move forward since then?
Yeah, it took years just to rebuild my life, and I feel in some ways I still am, but I knew I wanted to help people like myself with this approach. I couldn't picture going back to journalism exactly, so trained with you and other people, and then became a mind body coach and started helping people like myself. And it just feels like such a heart work to be able to pass this on and look at all the changes and transformations that people go through who are both exposed to this and open to it.
It's amazing. It's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for being you. Thank you for trusting us and paying it forward, doing things now to help others. It's amazing.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Awesome.